Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius, the official energy drink of pewterreport.com. It is a Tuesday edition of the show. Hello to everybody that is joining us this afternoon as we continue our deep dive into free agency, which is right around the corner. We're having a little bit more of a focus on the defensive side because we know that's where the Bucs are going to be making their biggest moves. So yesterday's show on Monday, we talked about the potential available safeties that the Bucs may be looking at. Today, we will turn our attention back to the secondary, but at the cornerback position. So if you missed our shows about the safeties yesterday, check it out on our YouTube channel. But today we're going to talk about the corners, talk a little franchise tag as well. Will the Bucs be using it? I'm your host, Matt Matera. Joined with me, a great guy, a co-host of the Pewter Game Day show and frequent contributor to the podcast as well. He is on a 3-game podcast streak with the live draft on Sunday. He joined me yesterday, and he's back again today. It is Josh Capo, the Joe DiMaggio of podcasts, they're calling him. Josh, how we doing?
I'm doing well. I think DiMaggio and Cal Ripken's, their records are safe. But I don't know if I'm going to quite make that stretch. But it's been nice to be on 3 days in a row.
Yeah, hell yeah. We love having you on as much as possible. What would the football equivalent be? Are you the Jeff Fiegels of this?
I was going to say Josh Allen, because wasn't that the big thing for Week 18 with him this past year season? They had nothing to play for. He played like the first 3 snaps to get keep the streak alive. I think it's Josh Allen.
Okay. Yeah, because I remember back in the day, like Fiegels broke the record. He was a punter for the Giants, and I think before that, the Eagles, which is funny because his name is Fiegels. And people were like, come on, man, it's a punter. Like, what kind of record is this? And then Eli Manning had the record for a little bit. But then comically, hysterically, the Giants, on their own doing, snapped that streak to start Geno Smith for one game. For one game. And then they went back to Eli Manning. So they broke the streak for no reason at all. And shout out to Geno Smith. Has revived his career, of course, thanks to Dave Canales and only Dave Canales. I kid. He did it with a lot of help and great great ability to overcome adversity as well. Eli Manning not in the Hall of Fame this year, but we'll see if he ends up in the Hall of Fame eventually. Anyway, shout out to Gabriel Polo, who says, love the energy, Matty Dimes. Appreciate it. We always try to bring the energy on this show. We'll answer any super chats we get today, any comments as well, depending on the topic. We'll get into that too. Before we talk about the corners and the availability of these corners, who might the Bucs be interested in? Josh just had a story that came out before about if the Bucs are going to be using the franchise tag on one Rod Christopher Godwin, who is set to become a free agent in March. But the franchise tag has just started. It's open for teams to use. Obviously, T. Higgins comes to mind. The Vikings have a tough decision, whether at quarterback or at corner, which we'll talk about today as well. And for the Bucs, Chris Godwin is the big one. But based on the history of the Bucs using the franchise tag with Chris Godwin, Josh, it does not appear that they're going to use it again with their very talented star wide receiver.
Yeah, they're absolutely not going to use it because it would require them to invest. The estimate is around $41 million on a 1-year deal for Chris Godwin. And the reason for that, without getting like too detailed, but the normal tag does not apply to Godwin because the Bucs have previously tagged him. And the way that works in the NFL is any player who has been tagged once, the second tag means that they get a 20% raise on their salary cap hit the year before. If either that or the if that number is higher than the tag number just for the position group. And then, but for Godwin, he's been tagged twice, and people may forget this, but the Bucs did tag him in 2021. He played on the tag. They then tagged him in 2022 because they had not gotten a deal done leading up to full free agency, and they did not want him talking to another team. And so they used the franchise tag that second year, which meant that they had to give him a 20% raise on his $15.2 million salary from 2021. It would have put him around $19.1 million. But eventually the two sides worked out the extension that he just finished playing on, which was that 3-year, $60 million deal. Well, the fact that they used the tag, even though he didn't play on it, it still counts, which means that the Bucs have used 2 tags on Godwin. Even though it has been 3 years since it's happened, doesn't matter. They've still used 2 tags. And the rule for that is a 44% raise over his 2025 cap number. His 2025 cap number was like 28 million, which would mean that they would have to, it would go up to 39 million, or the way it goes is a 44% raise on their previous year's cap number, or the average, basically the tag number for the highest paid position group in the NFL, which is always quarterbacks. And the tag number for the quarterbacks is $41 million. So that, and it's the higher of the 2. So that means that if the Bucs were to tag Godwin, it would be for about $41 million for 1 year, and his value is just not there. Even if he hadn't sustained his dislocated ankle, the value wasn't going to be there. He absolutely would have been like a $30 million man. But to give you some perspective, $41 million would make him the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL by $6 million. So right now it's Justin Jefferson at 35. That number will be surpassed. It could be surpassed up to 3 times this offseason. If some dominoes fall the way that I think they will, the Jamar Chase contract, Micah Parsons probably getting an extension, Myles Garrett probably getting an extension. Those 3 dominoes will push it. But even so, those 3 guys probably like the staggering of their deals probably wouldn't get to the 41 million that the Bucs would have to use, or that the tag number would be if the Bucs decide to use it for Godwin. So it's just not happening. His value is about half that. And so there's no reason for the Bucs to tie up that much cap money on him.
Yeah, we love Chris Godwin, but there are not many people in the league that are, should be getting paid $40 million per season. And because of his age as well, I know he's not, again, like very old, but he's getting along there where, like Justin Jefferson, it makes sense to pay him all of that money. He's, still pretty young in the league compared to Chris Godwin. And that doesn't mean that he won't get a nice payday this season. It's very interesting with the fact that they've already used it twice with Chris Godwin, even though one of them they technically, like, they used it, but they didn't have to apply it once they got the new deal done, as you were just talking about. If, say, like, they didn't use that franchise tag the last time and the deal just got done and they kind of still had that in their back pocket. I know it's a coulda, woulda, shoulda, so it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. But if they had that at their disposal, would it still be the same astronomical number, or would that be a little bit more in play had they not used it before?
If he had, it might have been in play if they hadn't used the 2022 tag and if he hadn't gotten injured, because then you're looking at around $32.5 million being the tag number for him, which is a bit more palatable. It would have probably been maybe a little bit north of what his free agent market would have been, which probably would have been around $30 million a year on a longer term deal. So you look at 32.5 and you say, okay, we just absolutely don't want him negotiating with anyone else. We just want to keep him at the negotiating table for us to get him somewhere between 29 and 31. We'll use the 32. We feel good about, being able to pull some other levers on that. Yeah, it might have been, but once he dislocated his ankle, any tag talk, even if they had never applied a tag on him, was kind of out the window. Because right now, I want to say the receiver tag, just in general, if it had never been applied to him, is somewhere around $26 million.
Yeah, so the Bucs are down to their last strike with the franchise tag and Chris Godwin specifically. And as Michael Scott once said, "Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, strike 3." Kieran Butt says, wouldn't there also be a cap? Kieran says, wouldn't there also be a cap hit if they don't reach a deal before free agency? Correct me if I'm wrong. Sorry for breaking you, but I had that in my head.
Yeah. So Kieran, that deadline actually passed this week. I think it actually passed yesterday. So the Bucs are going to be on the hook for 18.2, somewhere around there, $1 million in dead cap from his last contract. Probably should have done a story on that one. I'll go ahead and just kind of put it out there now. But yeah, that deadline passed yesterday. So the two sides did not come to, and it didn't, we haven't heard of any negotiations that are actively going that would have been close, but that deadline passed yesterday. No deal was done. So yeah, the Bucs are going to absorb around an $18.2 million dead cap hit for Godwin from his previous deal. Now, a lot of people may be upset about that, but the Bucs are in really good cap situation to take on that hit. And the good news is any new deal doesn't carry the additional cap hits of the old deal onto it. So there are pros and cons to both sides of that. And the big pro to just letting the contract hold, taking that dead cap hit in 2025 means if they do come to a new deal with him in 2026, any money on there is only from this new deal. It doesn't carry any charges from the old deal. And that's how you stay cap healthy.
And the Bucs have done a pretty good job overall in Jason Light's tenure of staying cap healthy. I know everybody will, turn back to the fact that, they didn't have a lot of room once Tom Brady had left because of the money they gave him. But again, they won a Super Bowl. So there's not really necessarily anything wrong with doing that either. Last franchise tag question for me, and I appreciate all this information. And
Sure.
I think it's important for Bucs fans to know as well. With Chris Godwin out of the picture from a franchise tag standpoint, have you thought of, and if not, that's okay, but is the franchise tag still in play for the Bucs with maybe another player? Now, I know they don't really have too many, guys that are available free agents that are, key contributors at the moment, like Ben Bredesen, but he was on a very cheap contract. They obviously wouldn't franchise tag him. Is there really anyone that's kind of even eligible for it, or is this just a season where the Bucs it would be shocking if they used it?
Yeah. And actually, I do need to correct myself, Matt. I just double checked. It's February 20th for the Godwin contract. So there is technically still 2 more days, but I think we would have heard more about active negotiations. So I think it's safe to say that deal is not going to get done. To your question, which was a really good one. No, I don't think anybody else is in play because your next best player who's up for free agency is Lavonte David. And Lavante's been signing deals between $5 and $10 million a year for the last few years now. Again, you basically just look at the starters, right? So you mentioned Bredesen. I think you brought up a really good point. He was playing on a cheap deal. He absolutely outperformed his last deal, but he's nowhere close to the offensive line tag. And that's one of the things that I think is important to note is that the NFL uses antiquated terminology for player classifications. And because of that, there are certain position groups where you're almost never going to see the franchise tag used because certain position groups get thrown in with others. So offensive line, right? So all guards and centers are thrown into the same grouping from a franchise tag calculation standpoint as tackles. And because the way the franchise tag is calculated, it's based off the top contracts at the position group. It's basically based off of offensive tackle contracts. So the franchise tag for offensive linemen, including guards and centers, is projected by over the cap right now at a little over $25 million. Well, the highest paid interior offensive lineman in the NFL right now is Landon Dickerson at $21 million. So there's not going to be this application for any guards or any centers. Right now, the conversation that people are talking about might happen is Trey Smith for Kansas City. Is Kansas City may apply the transition tag, which is a slightly lower number. It would still make him the highest paid guard in the NFL, just if he were to play on that transition tag of $22.75 million. So that's one. The other one is they do I think it's what linebackers all together. So inside linebackers are being grouped together with outside linebackers, 3-4 outside linebackers who are pass rushers, guys who are paid like edge rushers. And so you're not going to see somebody like Zach Bond get hit with a franchise tag because it'd be $27 million. And right now the top paid linebacker in the NFL is, I want to say, Fred Warner at like 19. So for some of these position groups, and this, you hear it every year about guys fighting to be classified as one thing versus another. A few years ago, it was Jimmy Graham trying to fight to be classified as a wide receiver if he was going to be tagged or to be tagged because he wanted to be classified as a slot wide receiver, not as a tight end, because the tag numbers on them are so different. So the NFL really has to improve that with the next CBA and start classifying guys correctly.
I don't understand why it's been this way for so long that they can't just differentiate the two. Like, I remember back in the day, and I know Bucs fans won't like this, but I believe Jimmy Graham was still on the Saints at the time.
Yep.
And he was trying to argue like, well, he gets used like a wide receiver, so he should get franchise tag under the wide receiver money versus the tight end money, because it makes such a huge difference. So it's ridiculous because it hurts in like Pro Bowls as well, or at least it did previously, where you're putting outside linebackers with inside linebackers, and defensive ends kind of get their own way. It's odd.
So it's something that has to be kind of hammered out in collective bargaining. So you have to wait for the next CBA to come around. Yeah. And you also there are certain players who are obviously for the reclassification, but other players, it's kind of competing interests within that side of the negotiation. Because if you are a center or a guard, you don't have to worry about a franchise tag impeding your negotiations to get a long-term contract, right? So there are certain players who are like, hey, I'm really happy that the tag isn't being held over, will never be held over my head. You have other players who get upset about it. So it's probably not very high in terms of when the players go to collectively bargain, it's probably not high on their negotiating points because it's not something that every player is looking for.
Interesting. All important stuff this time of the season, this time of the year. The Bucs are going to have an important move to make when it comes to their roster. There's one guy, Bucs fans haven't been happy with him. I think they wanted to get out of town. Jamel Dean.
Yeah.
I think this is an interesting conversation. Because overall, I like Jamel Dean, the person, but we can't just look at him as a person. We have to look at him from a player standpoint. And I don't know how much. I think Jamel Dean's best days are behind him. And part of that is, for this picture right here, is his ability to stay healthy. He's missed a handful of games, and I think Scott brought up a good point last week. It's not even the games that he misses. Like, that obviously factors in. But a lot of times he'd get hurt in games. And let me preface this. The NFL's so difficult to make it at this level, and freak injuries happen in so many different ways. So I'm not blaming Jamel Dean. I mean, when I play volleyball and I feel it in my leg a little bit, like, I'm just playing a non-contact sport. Jamel Dean's playing the greatest sport in the world, the most physical sport in the world at the highest level. So with all of that said, the best ability is availability. And I think the problem with Jamel Dean, besides his contract, and we can talk about his contract, but besides the availability, it's that he hasn't taken the ball away like I think people want from a top corner on the team. He's really good in coverage, and he was, earlier in his career too. But if you're not available and you're not taking the ball away, that's kind of a recipe for the Bucs to say, all right, let's see how we can move on from this position and this player specifically.
Yeah, it's a really tough one from a lot of different perspectives, because I think everything that you just mentioned is very valid. At the same time, we saw how bad the play was behind him last year. Yeah. And the big thing here with Dean is his contract's not that unreasonable. His salary this upcoming year isn't that unreasonable. Yes, the Bucs could save cap by releasing him, but they don't really need the cap savings. There are lots of other levers that they can pull. And if you let go of him, you are letting go of a talented player. And that means that you have to refill that hole. So it's kind of a 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other. Like, I could see the Bucs keeping him and then just adding to the room and creating additional depth. There is a small difference between this year and what happened with Carlton Davis last year. I would say 2 key differences. Number one, I don't think Dean is going to be as valuable in the trade market. I don't know if there is a market for him, to be completely honest with you. There may be. It's really hard to gauge right now. And then the other thing was Carlton Davis they moved on from him because they felt really good that they already had a replacement in house with Zion McCollum. And this year, if you move on from Dean, who's replacing him? It's not Tyreek Funderburk and it's not Josh Hayes. So, so when do they let Dean go later on in free agency after they feel good about signing somebody? I guess that's a possibility. Do they let him go after the draft, after they've drafted somebody and the draft falls that way? That's a possibility. But the Bucs don't usually operate that way, and it wouldn't be a bit of a disservice to Dean to let go of him after, basically after he has an opportunity to catch on with another team for a decent deal. So I keep going back and forth, but I very much could see the Bucs deciding we're going to keep Dean at a reasonable salary this year, reasonable cap hit, because we want to add more talent to the room, but we want to make sure that we're not cutting off our arm before we can regrow one, basically. So it's hard to say. I could see it. I could literally see it going either way.
The biggest part in all of this, and you did an excellent job with kind of hammering that home, is the reason why it's different from Carlton Davis is everyone besides Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean. Like, Zion McCollum was such a big piece to the puzzle, in the offseason last year, based on how they and we all thought he was going to perform. He's just as big of a puzzle this season and moving forward as well. But if you let go of Jamel Dean, that's exactly the point, and kind of what we're going to talk about today. If you let go of Jamel Dean, well, who's coming in to replace him? Because you only got Zion McCollum, who's holding the fort down on one side. Do they do it in free agency? And how much more expensive is going to be the corner that they're getting? Do they try to find a bargain, but an upgrade over, Funderburk and Josh Hayes? Do they decide we're going to go all in on some of the available corners that are in free agency this year, and we'll figure out edge rusher and linebacker through the draft or whatever the case may be? If you draft a corner, let's just say with your first round pick, the Eagles were able to strike gold with drafting some rookie corners, and, obviously Cooper DeJean, we all saw what he did in the Super Bowl with the pick 6, but that doesn't always go down that way. You're kind of relying a lot on, one guy to pick up the slack of a really important role in every single defense, but obviously, the Bucs defense specifically in this one. Alex G says, I don't know who you all think is going to trade for Dean. Way better options in the draft and free agency. Steven Stansfield says, give Jamel Dean another year, and if he can't make it in 25, then move on. So a lot of options for the Bucs when it comes to this, kind of like how there's a lot of options when picking a Celsius energy drink. Of course, Celsius is the official energy drink of pewterreport.com. Check out all the great flavors that Celsius has, from the Arctic vibe to the Playa vibe, or the Playa vibe, which is a pina colada flavor. You see the sparkling watermelon lemonade on the screen there as well. So you can't go wrong with any choice. If you need to know where to find a Celsius energy drink, head on over to the Celsius store locator on their website. Punch in your address. It'll tell you the closest place where you can pick one up. Could be a Walmart, a GNC, a Publix, a Piggly Wiggly, a Stop and Shop, or your bodega.
Bodega.
Noise. What do they say in Brooklyn Nine-Nine? Noise, toy, smart. And after you keep going to your bodega and you love Celsius and you want more, you want to get a bunch of Celsius out there, you can buy it in bulk over on Amazon with the subscribe and save. I'd recommend that variety pack because there's so many fantastic flavors. You can go and try out all the different kinds that they have. So Amazon, subscribe and save, have it sent to your place of residence completely at your leisure. just make sure you're drinking Celsius Energy Drinks, the official energy drinks of pewterreport.com. All right, Josh. So as we take a look at these free agents available that maybe the Bucs will go after this offseason, depending on what happens with Jamel Dean, a big part of this as well is the TODD, Todd Bowles. He's got a type when it comes to corners. He likes the tall, lanky corners, some players that have size. That's why you saw why Jamel Dean got drafted and Carlton Davis got drafted, and Zion has that as well. So, in a sense, even though there are some big names out there, you can kind of knock a couple of off the board already just based on their size. Can you not?
Yeah, you really can. So like one of the biggest names that's out there, he's been an extremely productive corner over the last few years. He's probably the second or third best corner out in the market, at least in terms of the deal that he's going to get, is DJ Reed from the Jets, right? So yeah. Reed is a fantastic corner. He's also 5'9". And that is not that has not been a Todd Bowles corner for a perimeter corner over the course of like his entire coaching career. He prefers his corners to be tall and with long arms. And that kind of the threshold that they look at is 6 feet, right? So Carlton Davis cleared that. Jamel Dean cleared that. Sam McCollum cleared that. Sean Murphy-Bunting cleared that. Some people will point out that there have been some depth corners that the Bucs have brought on in previous years who have been sub 6 feet, and those have always been kind of back of the roster. We pull lever in case of emergency type guys, not sought after. We want to put this guy in the starting lineup type of guys. So somebody like DJ Reed probably doesn't cut it. Another one where maybe the talent that he's shown can overcome it because he's not that far off, but like Asante Samuel Jr., I think he was 5'10" and like 5'8" or something like that. You can round up to 5'11", still doesn't quite hit that 6 foot marker, but I would think he would probably be lower on the Bucs list just in terms of the type of corner that Todd Bowles likes to use on the outside. So those would be two names kind of right off the bat. And it does also put like Byron Murphy Jr. into a little bit of a limbo there because technically he's sub 6 foot himself. So just a few names there that don't quite hit that 6 foot with long arms threshold that the Bucs typically look for in an outside cornerback. And that starts to condense the list by quite a bit.
It does. And I think it's helpful that we can kind of, take names off the list right away. It's kind of like you're playing Clue or another board game or, Battleship. And it's like, is it this spot? No. Okay. You can take that off the list. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of DJ Reed. He's like an absolute pit bull when he plays. And in the sense of like, he knows how to play with another top corner, or at least obviously you're on different sides of the field, but at least in the sense of like, you may see more targets just based on who the other corner is. He's ready for that type of situation. But if Todd Bowles doesn't want based on a height standpoint, like what are you necessarily going to do? And that's what differentiates as well with like what we know and what we want, right? Because like we're going to do our Bucs battle plans. We talked about it a little bit on yesterday's show. The Bucs battle plans will be coming up in a couple of weeks. When we get to play GM, who knows? Maybe one of us puts DJ Reed on the list. I actually am not, so there's a little spoiler for you. But if Jason Light knows, well, Todd doesn't want this guy, they're not going to go after him. So that's very important to keep in mind. Do you view Zion McCollum as a number one dude? And also, in the past, depending on who the receiver was, Todd Bowles would occasionally have like Carlton Davis go across the field and follow the guy. That wasn't the Bucs' MO, at least as of late. Could Zion be one of those guys if Todd Bowles wants to try something a little bit different this year? Because clearly not everything was sunshine and roses last season on defense.
I think Zion would have to show more than he has in the past. Because, and I think you and I have talked about it quite a bit actually on the game day podcast, right?
Yeah.
It seemed like every time Todd decided, all right, let's play some man coverage, that very first man rep, Zion happened to get burned. So I think that he would have to show a little bit more in man coverage for Todd to feel comfortable saying, yeah, he's the guy where every so often when I want to play follow, if there's a premier receiver out there. And I think the game that I go back to, and it may stick out in your mind as well, Matt, was 2022 against the Bengals, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
When Carlton followed Jamar Chase and had perhaps the game of his life. I don't know that Todd Bowles feels comfortable with Zion in that kind of role. And then we saw, kind of the last last year, I think it was, where he does so little following or assigning a follow that I don't know if the Bucs necessarily need like a number one corner so much as they just need two good corners to play on either side, because that's really what they do. They play their side.
No, yeah, for sure. I was just more curious than anything else. I'm not saying the Bucs should do it, but I think it's an important conversation or a good conversation to have, especially this time of the year. Like, what kind of changes are the Bucs going to make on the defensive side besides just like, hey, we're going to bring in better talent? Because I think it's more than just let's bring in better guys and all of a sudden everything is going to be fixed. That's not always how it works specifically. Another player we should talk about, he was on the graphic as well, is Charvarius Ward from the 49ers. Didn't have the best year last season, but overall has a very solid track record as a corner in this league. A lot of available free agents for the 49ers this year that some people, both at Pewter Report and just in general, want Tampa Bay to go get. So, I mean, hey, if the 49ers are going to take John Lynch, the Bucs might as well take all of John Lynch's players.
Call it a deferred trade, right? Yeah, Ward, I think he does match the size profile that the Bucs are looking for. So he's over 6 foot. He does have a decent, arm length. He has been very good for a very long time. First 4 seasons coming in Kansas City, then 2 years in San Francisco prior to last year, all really, really good. Last year wasn't like, if you were to check his PFF grades, they didn't look great. I think he played just fine. Probably not up to his overall standards, but for those who don't know, and they'll probably, again, if you're checking like statistics on him, you'll say, oh, well, he missed games. Do you really want another injured corner? Charvarius Ward missed games for a completely different reason, not so much injury. There was a tragedy. Unfortunately, he lost a child. So, that seems to be something that is, from what I've gathered around the league, is he wants to leave San Francisco because there is so much pain associated with that area for him due to that loss. And so if that's the case, and he's truly kind of hell bent on getting to free agency and getting to another team, yes, he had a down year last year, but there's good reason to think that could be a bounce back for him for 2025. So he would be a free agent I'd be highly interested in the Bucs pursuing.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And the context is very important, and it's very, very tragic as well. So it makes total sense why he would want to leave San Francisco, even if his overall career there was pretty solid. But, obviously the personal life is more important. And, we saw how that impacted Shaq Barrett as well, with his kind of like his hesitancy to speak in training camp until he was like fully ready. Because obviously that's, a unthinkable situation to be in. And then on the same side of it, it kind of made Shaq want to come back to Tampa when he decided to come out of retirement based on that, family feel. And that's not to say that the 49ers don't have that, but everyone is, completely in their own situation, and everybody goes through things and reacts to things in different ways as well. And if you go back one season for Ward in 2023, he had an absolute bonkers season with 5 interceptions. And again, the name of the game for the Bucs in the secondary, really the whole team, but in the secondary, is take the ball away, specifically with interceptions. I mean, obviously you'll take it however you can get it, but only 7 interceptions last year is a big time thing that certainly needs to get fixed, along with another number of other topics. So Ward certainly is a fit. He's got the size. He can take the ball away based on what he's done his whole career in 2023 specifically. I know you mentioned Byron Murphy earlier, and the size might be a bit of a challenge for if he wants to go to the Buccaneers. But also, from what I've been reading as well, it seems like the Vikings with the franchise tag, sure, there's the Sam Darnold side of it and what they're going to do with Sam Darnold. But it seems like if they don't franchise tag Darnold, he could be the one that gets franchise tag, which obviously puts him off the market for the Bucs.
Yeah, and I just real quick, kind of circling back to how we began this podcast, the Vikings aren't sure whether they want to use a $41 million franchise tag on Sam Darnold. I think tells you everything you need to know about the Bucs using a $41 million franchise tag on Chris Godwin. But yeah, so if they don't, there is a chance that they could use it on Murphy. And I want to say the cornerback franchise tag is, I'm going to look it up real quick. Try and remember what it is. It's $20.4 million, which is, again, kind of similar to what we were talking about with Godwin, had there been no tags placed on him across his career. It's a little bit north of kind of where I've got his projected APY on a potential deal, like an actual contract that he negotiates. I've got his APY at 18 million. So the Vikings would be going a little north of probably his overall value, but it's for a guarantee that you get his services, and it's low downside for the Vikings because then you get him for 1 year and you don't have to worry about a long-term deal. He gets injured or he plays poorly and you're on the hook past that first year. So yeah, there is a good chance that he doesn't even make it to market. The Vikings could do with him like the Bucs did with Godwin in 2022, place the tag on just to extend the amount of time for that negotiating window to get a full contract in place. So yeah, that one's I just don't see him getting to a point where the Bucs could even negotiate with him. And then even if they do, I still have my reservations on whether he would be a target. The one thing that you mentioned about Ward, and I think it's important to bring up with Murphy, is if the Bucs want some type of change in terms of turnovers, Byron Murphy is a playmaker. He makes plays on the ball. I want to say, what was it, 6 interceptions last year, if I remember correctly, and 3 the year before that, if my memory serves me well, and it doesn't always. So, but suffice to say, he has quite a few turnovers over the last few seasons, and that's fueling a big part of his valuation and why he's going to get a decent amount of money. Yeah, 6 interceptions last year, 3 the year before that, and 4 in 2021. So, and then you look at 16 pass breakups in the last 3 years as well. So a guy who can make plays on the ball. So if the Bucs want to change that culture a little bit and just go find guys who have proven to make plays on the ball, Byron Murphy's the guy. The other thing with Byron Murphy is he comes from a blitz heavy system where he's often left kind of out on an island. And Flores has changed his scheme up over the last few years. He used to be blitz heavy with man behind it. He's gone into more of this zone coverage, which is what Todd Bowles does. So there's some system similarities that I think would make for an easy transition for Byron Murphy if the Bucs were to be interested in him.
Another name I've seen people talk about, and it pops up here and there. Certainly one of the, if you look at every free agency ranking, especially at the cornerback position, he's in the mix, is Rasul Douglas. Kind of another similar situation of a guy who overall in his career has proven that he's got a nose for the football, if you will. Last season did not have an interception, but 2023 had 4. 6 in 2023 with 2 different teams. He's played for Buffalo, Green Bay, Carolina, began his career with Philly. He had a 5 interception season with the Packers in 2021, 4 in 2022. So he's a guy that also takes the football away. He will be 30 in August, though, so a little bit on the higher age side as well. But he is a playmaker just overall in his career. Is his lack of production last season, is that kind of a concern? He played in 15 games, so it wasn't like he really missed a lot of time. But is that someone who might be on the decline a little bit, or just one of those, maybe it's time for a change of scenery and he can get back to the type of playmaker that he's been?
Yeah, I for one am not high on him as a Bucs fit. I do think that as he approaches 30, I think you're starting to see the downside of his career. The quarterback rating allowed on when he was targeted last year was 116.9. That was a career high. And then he was coming off of like his best season in 2023, where the quarterback rating allowed was 72.9. So he could be seen as a buy low candidate, but just given the age, given the fact that he did have kind of a tough season for a Bills defense that otherwise kind of excelled in the back end, I think Sean, what's their head coach's name again? I'm trying to remember.
The Bills?
Yeah.
I was gonna say Sean Hockley, but that's the Reds. I'm picturing his face too.
So what I will say is the Bills did quite a few interesting things schematically last year, which helped their defense play pretty well despite a lackluster pass rush. And Douglas just didn't seem to shine in that, whereas a lot of other players did. So he wouldn't be one that I would put high on my target list.
Sean McDermott. I just looked it up. I didn't.
Thank you. I knew I had the right name. First name correct.
Yeah. We're going to talk about a couple of more players in just a moment, but also want to talk about our friends over at Brier Grieves Insurance. If you're a longtime podcast listener, or maybe a new podcast listener, and you've heard us talk about him before, but you probably remember the late, great Mark Cook talking about Brier Grieves Insurance. Also, Pewter Report Scott Reynolds has been a Brier Grieves customer for years, and there simply isn't a better insurance company in the Tampa Bay area. Visit Brier Grieves Insurance to see for yourself. Brier Grieves Insurance is family-owned, and their main goal is helping people. They want to find the right insurance policy for you and your family. Whether it's home or auto, boating insurance, or business insurance, turn to Brier Grieves and find out why their personal touch and customer service sets them apart. The days of waiting on hold to speak with an insurance representative that you don't even know are over. With Brier Grieves Insurance, you'll have a relationship with your agent who can answer your questions and advise you on the best policies. As 2 recent hurricanes have shown all of us that live in the Tampa Bay area, there is a cost to living in paradise. Brier Grieves can help make sure you have the right hurricane and flood insurance to make sure you and your home are protected. So visit BrierGrievesInsurance.com today. That's Brier, B-R-I-E-R, Grieves, G-R-I-E-V-E-S, or call their office today at 813-876-4166. Again, that is 876-4166. Tell them that Pewter Report sent you. Also, want to give a shout out to our Pewter Platinum members. Thank you to Scott Federico, Rathel Gordon, Noah Parr, Scotty J, Dave Anderson, Eric McMillan, Zach Jarvis, Hezo813, Ash Fishpool, Joel Elrican, Sam, John Dale Morris, and Zach Brannigan for your support of PewterReport.com, for being Pewter Premier members. So thank you all so much. We will have a Pewter Insider on Friday as well for Pewter Platinum and Premier members as well. So thank you to everybody. Some people in the comments as well, Josh, were talking about could Jamel Dean take a pay cut and stay with Tampa Bay? Is that in the realm of possibility, or is the money moved around too much that it's not really feasible?
I mean, the Bucs can ask him to, but looking at the free agent market, I think so the Bucs owe him, I want to say $13.5 million in cash this season. I think he could get a similar deal if he were released. So from Dean's perspective, there's no incentive to take the pay cut. So because I do think that he would get something similar if he were to go to the open market. So I don't foresee that being an option there.
You know, one thing that I really enjoyed when we were at the Senior Bowl this year is, spending time with all of our Pewter reporters. You know, we live in different areas. Sometimes we only get together like at the Bucs facility or on these trips. And we had some good conversation earlier in the trip about Saturday Night Live and some of our favorite skits. They just had the 50th anniversary. Did you happen to watch it?
So it was a 3.5 hour special. My wife and I are about an hour in, so we're taking it in pieces. But yeah, I got to see some of it, and I got to see the musical one, like with all the performers.
Friday show with all the content.
Friday's show. That was phenomenal. Yeah,
very cool. And I think one thing that's really exciting about that is 50 years and all these people come back, whether it's Eddie Murphy or Will Ferrell and Adam Sandler, and the list goes on and on and on. Kristen Wiig. It's great. It's so cool. It's like a big reunion. That's essentially what it is. It's an anniversary and it's a reunion. So what about the reunion of Carlton Davis with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? If there's a world where they move on from Jamel Dean, is Carl in the mix for the Bucs?
Oh, I would love to see it because I was always a big fan of Carlton Davis' game. His attitude, he was a great interview in the locker room. He was always very honest, whether it was, something where he got to talk positively or if it was, not so positive, just always very truthful and good for a good quote. I doubt the Bucs are in the market for Carlton. A reunion there, as you put it. But if they were to be interested, $14.5 million is probably the APY he gets on a new deal over 3 years, which is close to what he got the last time him and the Bucs signed a deal. So he obviously fits the system. He played very, very well for Detroit last year, but his season ended prematurely due to an injury, which is the big reason why the Bucs traded him in the first place. So I don't know if that's in the cards because, again, like the reason why he wasn't in the playoffs for Detroit was the same reason why the Bucs finally got frustrated and decided to move on from him. So I don't know if I see that one working out.
Totally. That's the biggest thing. And, nostalgia hits you sometimes. And it's like, oh, Carlton, come back. But then you remember why they moved on from him in the first place and the injuries. Because, again, like you're just kind of swapping out an often injured guy for another often injured guy. But shout out to Carlton Davis. He is quite enjoyable when he is playing. I mean, that game, I can't recall. It was like a Sunday night game. It was a primetime game. I think it was Sunday night or Monday night this season when it was Lions-Texans. The Lions made this crazy comeback. But Carlton had this like insane interception in the end zone that helped the Lions win the game, obviously, as they're trying to make the comeback. But I was like, damn, like where was this with the Bucs? Because he had a couple more interceptions than Jamel Dean, but he very much was also someone that couldn't really hold on to the football. But anyway, wanted to get to this comment as well from I Like Rice Bish, who says, ever since Dean's interview about being late to the Jets game, he's solid gold as a human, LMAO. Maybe a little fragile, though. So he wasn't. They were late to the game. I believe it was him and Sean Murphy bunting, but it wasn't their fault. So that's the other part that's forgotten about the Antonio Brown craziness of that game is it started with Jamel Dean and Sean Murphy bunting showing up 30 minutes before the game because they were on the COVID list. So they had to fly separately. But then the pilot for the flight that they were supposed to take didn't show up or was like mad late or whatever the story was. So they had to get a police escort from the airport to MetLife Stadium and had to like warm up real quick and go play. And then chaos continued to ensue in the game. But anyway, Jamel Dean did tell the story after, and it was quite comical as he went about it. So just wanted to bring that up for sure. Josh, there were a couple of other people on your radar that you had mentioned before the show, whether it was Paulson Adebo, Mike Jackson, and Christian Fulton. Any one of those people specifically that you want to get into or mention, or that you think is a proper fit?
Yeah, I think Adebo would be a really, really good fit with the Bucs. Now, he was with the Saints. I don't see the Saints having necessarily the cap flexibility to keep him in town. After last year, and by last year, I should say, after the 2023 season, Adebo was on a trajectory to be like a $20 million corner. Not dissimilar to some of the articles I wrote about Zion McCollum early in the 2024 season. But last year, he suffered some injuries, a little bit of down play. And now my projection for him is around like $11 to $12 million per year. And I think that would be an excellent value on a guy who can play at a very, very high level. He meets the Bucs kind of size requirements. So that's kind of a check there. He's played in a man-heavy system in New Orleans. So it's interesting. I think we've talked about this in the past. Todd Bowles loves guys who can play press man, and then loves to never use them in press man ever again. So, but only played 7 games last year. And before anybody goes, well, why would they get another, injury-prone corner? That was the first year where he's really had any injury issues. But he had some really, really good games last year. And the year before in 2023, he only allowed a 69.9 quarterback rating when targeted. And even last year it was 67.0. And even though he only played 7 games last year, had 3 interceptions, has 7 interceptions and 18 pass breakups over the last 2 seasons. So he's proven to be a pretty reliable tackler over his career. So out of all the names, when you factor in everything from cost to are they even going to be available, Paulson Adebo would probably be like 1B to Charvarius Ward's 1A for me. And I might even have those backwards. I keep going back and forth, but Adebo would be somebody I would hope that the Bucs are checking in on.
It's weird, right? Like sometimes a down year is the benefit to all other teams when you have a chance for a bounce back. And we all know the crazy situation the Saints are in with it took them forever to find a coach. They're in a terrible cap situation. So the defense gave the Bucs issues for several years. So why not give it a shot? Tom says Adebo would be a good pick. Stick it to the Saints. I mean, that's not the only reason why they would do it, but hey, if that helps as well. And Kieran says, shame he's a free agent because I would have asked if we could trade George Edwards to Nola for him. And Uche Ebo says, do you guys think if the Bucs had more capable man-to-man defensive backs, Bowles would play more man?
Marginally, Uche, because if you go back to when Carlton Davis was on the roster, Carlton and Jamel Dean are both very good man corners. I mean, Jamel Dean for like a 3-year stretch was the highest graded man corner in the NFL. So he's had highly capable man corners on his team in the past and still chooses to play a ton of zone. And part of that just comes back to who Todd Bowles is in terms of how he structures his defense. He likes to run a blitz heavy defense, and it is very difficult to run man to man while also trying to blitz. And especially the way he blitzes is he tries to disguise his blitzes. And part of the goal of that is if you don't get to the quarterback, that you're changing the picture essentially post snap for the quarterback. So in order to do that, you want to run zone behind these exotic and kind of complicated blitzes, because once the quarterback gets to the back of his drop, he's got to contend with a quick decision coming from the blitz. And all of a sudden players are not where they expected them to be. If you're showing man coverage and you're blitzing or you're running man behind a blitz, it's pretty easy for the quarterback to understand, okay, I know who's going to be on who. So it goes against kind of the creativity and the structure of a Todd Bowles defense. And I think that's part of the reason why he doesn't run as much man. The counter argument to that would be a lot of people would say, well, Brian Flores, earlier iterations of Brian Flores, he did run a lot of man coverage behind a blitz heavy scheme. Current Brian Flores doesn't do that nearly as much. And even if you go back to the earlier iteration of him, it's a unicorn. There really aren't a lot of teams running that like he does. So that would be the reason for it. And kind of, we've seen him have those players. And yes, they did run more man coverage, but it was still one of the lower rates in the NFL.
Right. That was the biggest thing for me, is that, you had a younger Jamel Dean and a younger Carlton Davis, or really just, healthy players, and those two specifically. And yeah, they ran it a little bit more, but there wasn't like a significant addition or drop in that type of sense. So I completely agree with you there. Would I like to see more man-to-man? I would a little bit, but I don't necessarily know if that's going to happen. One thing I do know is that there is great, exceptional food and drinks over at Walk-Ons, and you should check it out very, very soon.
Yeah, so what happened out there tonight?
We struck out at home with leftovers, then we remembered Walk-Ons.
What effect did the situation have?
Spirit soared. Nick took on a burger. Jen obliterated her ribeye po' boy. And speaking of spirits, Laura even scored a real tasty cocktail. She needed that.
Any lessons learned today?
Yeah. Head straight to Walk-Ons.
Scratch-made dishes, wall-to-wall TVs, craft beers, and cocktails. Walk-Ons for the win.
Get to Walk-Ons ASAP. There are 3 in the Tampa Bay area, 1 over in Lakeland, another in Wesley Chapel, and a third, not that we're doing in any particular order, but a third over by Raymond James Stadium in Midtown. So check out Walk-Ons. Download their app as well. You can get free mozzarella logs when you download today. Earn, save, and win walk-on rewards, including earning a 100-point bonus for trying the Southern Bourbon Wings and their sauce that comes with it. So download the Walk-Ons app today and enjoy all of their food and drinks. Just a reminder to everybody as well, as we wrap up this show, we have some more positions to talk about this week. We'll discuss the linebackers and who is available in free agency tomorrow. Scott will be back on the show, so that's Wednesday. Thursday, we'll talk about the free agent options and just available options at edge rusher. And Friday, we will have a Pewter Insider for Pewter Platinum and Premier members as well. So before we head out, Josh, any last comments or thoughts about this cornerback free agent class? Anything specifically you want to see the Bucs do?
I think that I've kind of made my overall thoughts clear. For high end, Charvarius Ward would probably be number 1 on my board. Paulson Adebo, kind of that mid tier. And I haven't found the Jason Pinnock type yet on corner, like I did with safety, where like the value add. It's a much tougher position to kind of find that. I'm going to still be sorting through it over the course of the next few days. I'll probably have an article out this weekend or maybe early next week on kind of that diamond in the rough for the cheaper guys. But don't be surprised if the Bucs do something at the high or mid level and then a cheaper. I think that they are going to try and flood the position group both through the draft and free agency, and the room could look vastly different. It could just be Zion McCollum left over in terms of the perimeter guys. I think Tyke Smith and Christian Uzian are safe, but from the perimeter room, the next year's room could look, Zion McCollum could be the only holdover. That would not surprise me in the least. And when you combine that with the fact that linebacker could only have Servassier Dennis as the only holdover, you're talking about a massively different roster on the defense at 2 different position groups. It's kind of it's very interesting to see.
It would be. We'll end on this comment from Professor X, who says, "Isn't Lattimore available? Imagine him and Mike on the same team." I don't know what analogy you want to use. when hell freezes over, when pigs can fly. Trying to think what other analogies are there, but
I just finished up Cobra Kai, the TV series
Okay.
on Netflix, and that would be quite the Cobra Kai kind of storyline, because Cobra
Yeah.
Kai, the entire 6 seasons, is about once, heated rivals or hated rivals finally coming together for a common good. So that would be quite the thing. I don't want to see it. I absolutely want Lattimore
I
in
don't
the
think they
NFC
will.
South again.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen Jason Light troll so many people on social media, specifically Cameron Jordan. So I can't see. We all know how much like Mike means to Jason Light, and I don't think Jason would not do the move because it's like, oh, Mike doesn't like him. Like, we're not going to try to make our team better. But given his age, given his overall shitty attitude, talking about Marshawn Lattimore, obviously not Mike Evans. Like, it doesn't make sense, and you could just find someone else. So,
yeah.
Kia DeVillain says, a perfect analogy, Josh. LOL, spot on. So, yeah, that would be insane. That'd be crazy. You never know, but again, that would be absolutely shocking. They need a mutual other person to hate, and I don't know who else Mike Evans totally hates, because everyone hates Marshawn Lattimore. So, anyway, just interesting question or comment that I want to get to. Anyway, in the meantime, if you're not already doing so, please follow us on all of our social media on X, Facebook, Instagram. We are at Pewter Report. Our YouTube channel is Pewter Report TV. Please like and subscribe. Leave a comment on this video as well for who you want to see the Bucs sign. So, for Josh Capo, I'm Matt McPherson saying thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.